Morning. So, Doug, I was feeling for you as you were looking for your mark in the book. The very first time I spoke at Wellspring a number of years ago, I hadn't been aware that the service required a reading and it was expected of the speaker or the minister to do it. So they introduced me. I got out there and someone pointed out to me, well, where's your reading, Well, I had brought the Science of Mind text with me for what I was going to speak about, so I just said, oh, well, we'll take care of that. We'll let the divine mind, not my mind, direct it, right? So I just opened the book. I said, we're going to use the plot method. It's a very scientific, religious science term. Just opened the book, and the reading turned out to be just perfect, as does yours. Because the divine mind always, always, always helps us out when we need it, right? It knows. The knower knows. Let's see. I'm going to have to move somebody else's note here. So, as Bonnie mentioned, I'm kind of the wrap up here, and I'm looking to sort of take a line from Bonnie's talk about how the ending is the beginning and the beginning is the ending. And she spoke on Easter Sunday and kicked off the theme for the month with the resurrection idea and rising, and she took my talk from the previous week as part of the basis of her talk about the reveal, feel, deal, heal. And so I'm taking this rising and resurrection aspect a little bit farther today too. Then let's see. Then I think John Freedom was here, right? And he gave you a rather scientific presentation that was a bunch of video stuff that I didn't quite pick it all up because he was doing a lot of it on the screen and watching it in the video. I didn't really capture all of it. But one of the things that he mentioned that then he didn't talk about is, I guess, that he is an EFT practitioner, or an emotional freedom technique, or tapping. And I thought, well, that's one of the things I'm going to talk about. I hope he doesn't and he said, but I'm not going to talk about that today. So I guess he wanted you to come to his workshop and explore that with him a little more deeply. The 12th? May 9th. So if you are interested in that technique as one of the things I'm going to mention in my talk today, you might sign up or come to his workshop and learn more about that, because I'm going to run through a number of techniques today without getting into any depth on any of them. And so that will be something that if you're interested in that, you might learn more about that. And then Randy Granger was here and gave some tips on how to move beyond, how to get beyond your old beliefs or the beliefs that no longer serve you. And as always, played some instrument. I love the fact that Randy introduces and involves music in his presentations. So today, I'm wanting to talk about rising up from resistance to resonance. So that is kind of the title of my talk. To go into the aspect of emotion and how we can shift our whole process by managing and moving through our emotions is part of what I want to address today. And I want to thank those of you who did not stay home in your resistance to getting out of the weather and came down here to resonate with the rest of us. So I appreciate those of you who are brave souls to come out today, and you'll be awarded something. I'm sure that Spirit knows you're here for a reason. We're all here for a reason by divine appointment, and you will leave here this morning at a higher level than you came in, and that rising will be a part of the theme of the whole morning. So let's just rise up with it, right? So I want to talk about a couple of reasons why we might be motivated to rise up above our old beliefs, and how our beliefs kind of either run or ruin our lives, and what beliefs are. And then I want to deal with this emotional aspect a little bit on the idea of praising and raising. Rising and raising, sort of, it's bread or whatever. It's all going through that process. But one of the things that Randy asked in his talk was, well, why change? And I couldn't hear, but some of you in the audience participated and gave some reasons about why you would change. I think this mic is picking me up secondarily here. But I wanted to share with you a couple of quotes that I thought were meaningful about motivating us to consider the possibility that maybe our beliefs aren't true or don't serve us or in some fashion or another are limiting us in our lives. And the first one is from Mark Twain. And Mark Twain says, it ain't what you do know, it ain't what you don't know that'll get you in trouble. It's what you think you know for sure that just ain't so. Good. Even though I fumbled on it, you got it. It ain't what you don't know that'll get you in trouble. It's what you do know for sure that isn't really so. And then from a more serious writer, from Shakespeare, in Hamlet, Horatio says, there's more to heaven and earth. It's said to Horatio, there's more to heaven and earth than your philosophy. These are the areas where, to get down to kind of my sort of parlance, that I talk about, that the Mark Twain kind of thing, I get to what I call the Doppler effect. Now, those of you who are scientists know that it's really the Doppler effect. But to me, the Doppler effect is instead of getting the dope slap, you get what I call the blinding flash of the obvious, the Doppler effect, where it just comes at you really quickly, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, how did I miss seeing that? And then there's Wayne Dyer's comment about your erroneous zone. So we're all sort of in this place where we're resisting the idea that there's another idea, or there's another opinion, or there's another possibility. So that resistance is what's keeping us in our old beliefs. Bruce Lipton wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. And if you haven't read that, you might want to check that out, or check it out with the bookstore. Marcia must be in the bookstore. Oh, there she is, way back there. Okay. You guys are spread out all over. You're going to give me a lot of work to do today. I want you to hold all the energy in the room as well as possible and contain it, because there's people here, there, and everywhere, and like spots and aces and spaces. For those who we know are in the perfect spot because they stayed home out of the rain and the weather for whatever their reasons. But Bruce Lipton's book on the biology of belief, the concept or the theme of that book is essentially how our belief system, our understanding of the world through our filter, ends up, through what we understand to be the body-mind connection, that ends up providing opportunity for us to have higher level of health or maybe a lesser level of health, depending upon how we're running that belief system through this thing called the physical body, that every cell, we know now, has its own little brain, has its own little processing system through which it receives these emotions that are generated by our thoughts. And that the cumulative process of it, what Esther Hicks of Abraham says belief is chronic thinking. In other words, you're chronically thinking the same thought over and over again, and that thought is creating the emotion that's then being run through your system that ends up creating potentially some sort of dis-ease. And that dis-ease is something that Louise Hay, who is a religious science practitioner, for those of you who may not have known that about her, the very first book that she wrote before she had this publishing empire created out of it is a thing that we call the Little Blue Book. It's no longer blue, but most of you who are practitioners have seen Louise Hay's Little Blue Book, where through her practice as a practitioner back in New York, she began to see that there was a correlation between people's beliefs and emotions and what they were coming to her presenting, like, I got a sore throat. Well, what was that about, So she began to see that there was a correlation between what she perceived were her clients' beliefs and what they were presenting in their biology. So I think that certainly confirms for me that, or that I guess initiated what now Bruce Lipton and other scientists like him are proving up scientifically, that our beliefs become our biology, become our biography. And one of the quotes that I wanted to talk to you about this morning that I think is really very, very meaningful if we piece it apart, reverse engineer it, is from Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi said, watch your behaviors. Your actions become your habits. And then your habits become your values. And your values become your destiny. Your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions. Your actions become your habits. Your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. It comes full circle around this whole thing. So basically, if you just put it in science and mind lingo, your thinking makes your life. And to change your life, you change your thinking. Because it's the thoughts and the words and the actions that all flow through that process in our cumulative behaviors that show up as our life. So if you have a life that you're not all that happy with, or you think you'd like to have it be different or better, think about Gandhi's quote and look at where you need to focus your attention is back to the idea of those thoughts, words, and actions and emotions. He's not a word he's brought in there, but the emotions that are created in our system by the thoughts and ideas that we have. So I mentioned a minute ago that Esther Hicks says that a belief is a result of chronic thinking, of thinking the same thing over and over again. But what do we see as our beliefs, and what are old beliefs as a part of your theme? What is an old belief? Well, to me, an old belief isn't necessarily, when the rising above old beliefs, as the theme is, it's not necessary to rise above all of our old beliefs. I got some old beliefs that I think are pretty good, and I don't see any need to rise above them. They're old because they're from the past. They're chronologically from the past. Even if I just came upon this belief 5 seconds ago, it's still an older belief because it's something that's stored in my subjective, that Doug read to us about, that subjective mind that is part of what's either running or ruining my life. Well, it's either both. So limiting beliefs is what I believe are the old beliefs that I want to rise above, and that I invite you all to rise above. That we're going to talk about the resistance aspect of beliefs and how we want to move from the energy of resistance to the energy of resonance. And that resonance is with your new belief. I'm a personal believer in the idea that you have a natural tendency to fill a void like nature does. And if you rise above or remove or let go of or release or whatever word or term you want to use for it, some belief that no longer serves you, what's going to come in and take its place? So I want us to make a conscious choice about the new belief that I want to adopt. You see this in Ernest Holmes, someone was it you that talked about the denial and the affirmation? Yeah. Where you deny the old and embrace the new. And I call it erase, replace. If I'm going to erase something out of my consciousness, I want to replace it with something else, because I don't want another idea to just sort of fall in by some random chance. I'd rather make a decision that I want to have a choice in the matter about what my beliefs are and why I believe them. But to me, any limiting belief is basically resistance. It's something that is contracting rather than expanding. The way you can feel it in your body or know that you're sitting in the expression of that environment is you're feeling more tight, more contracted, more stressed, more up in a anxiety fashion or something. Those are all the ways that you can tell, but you can feel it in your body when you're in resistance. And that resistance is just to that idea or opinion that might be out there that you don't think you want to take in. My ex-husband, when he was in college, was studying business and marketing. He had a marketing professor who went on to win a bunch of awards. But one of the things that marketing professor did with his research, because you could see how it would apply to business and the marketing of goods and products and advertising, was primarily focused towards advertising. Anyway, this was back in the 60s. They determined through their research that basically by the time we're 10 years old, we're pretty much locked into our belief system. And it's only a consequence of some significant emotional event that we are open or cracked open and willing or made to, change our beliefs. Today we're experiencing the concern for the people in Nepal. They're having a pretty significant emotional event there. And it's going to result in a lot of change, a lot of opportunity for revisiting things. Anytime we have catastrophes, we learn. Hopefully we learn how to do something differently, better, new, whatever. And a new belief may come in about how something's supposed to be done. I remember in Mexico City in the mid-'80s when they had the earthquake. They decided later they had to build their buildings a little differently. We always have the opportunity to learn something new from that significant impact. Because what will happen is, and the research today still plays this out. There was a program this week on NPR on This American Life, where they were talking about how difficult it is to change people's opinion or mind or belief system about something, and how it only really happens when they have an emotional connection with something that moves them from resistance to resonance. And the stories that they were giving were about, first one was two issues. One was abortion, and the other one was gay marriage. And how they had done these research studies around volunteers who went out into the field in areas where there was known resistance to these concepts. That was very anti-abortion or very anti-gay marriage. This was in California, where they actually identified the districts where they had the vote on Prop, whatever it was, that went, Prop 8 that went down, and they identified those districts where they lost the election in that regard. And they discovered that the researchers who either were gay or lesbian, who actually expressed that in the conversation with the person on the other side of the conversation, they moved them. They would scale them. They start out by asking a question 0 to 10, where are you on this issue? And then by the time that they would have had the conversation and the personal connection, and that person would have shared something about their own life in that arena, like, well, I'm gay or I'm lesbian, and this is what's happened to me, and this is how this vote impacts my life, and that kind of thing. Or in the case of the abortion, there would be a woman who would confess during the conversation that she'd had the abortion after having made the connection, the emotional connection with the other person, that they would see that they would move on the scale. And one that they had on the radio, there was 0. This was on the anti-abortion. She was 0, no access to abortion at all. And by the time that the conversation was over, the woman had transferred to 10 because of the emotional shift that had happened. So this is still, today, the research from 50 years ago, it's still being borne out today. And when the researchers followed the people who were not, they were not personally impacted or affected by the issue, they were not as successful in moving anyone because there was no identification. There wasn't that same level of connection that had happened. Anyway, I thought it was pretty interesting. So the resistance or contraction that you feel, and that you feel from others when they're expressing their opinion. I mean, how many of you in here have ever changed a belief? Yeah, I don't think you'd be in this room if that weren't the case, right? So it's hard to know how we actually went about it, or how do you break that down and say, well, how do you rise above that old belief that you're stuck in, and get to this other level? And what were the steps you took, and how did it happen? See, my definition is a little different from Esther Hicks. I do think she's right. I think it comes from chronic thinking, but I call my belief system my BS. And your belief system is your BS. And the sooner we get to the understanding that it's just BS, the better. So one of the things that I learned about how to change my belief system and get to that emotional pattern interrupter of the chronic thinking was in the inner child workshops that we had here many years ago at the Center for Spiritual Living, which was then called the Mastery and Life Center. And that's, you do the hokey pokey. So you do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around, and that's what it's all about. So anytime that you find yourself stuck, you can just consider that and forget all the rest of this heavy stuff. By allowing yourself to get out of the negative emotion, doing or saying, just going back to Gandhi, you're taking the words, the actions, the behaviors, the thoughts, and you're transforming them all in one little step. Last time I was here, the band played Higher Love by Ricky Byers-Beckwith. And it made me think later, too, about the rising theme. When we got to that, I'm thinking about the Ike and Tina Turner, Want to Take You Higher. Want to Take You Higher. And that song is pretty much just the same words over and over and over again, except for the boom chakalaka laka, boom chakalaka laka. You know, and that's like the hokey pokey. If you can come up with something like that works for you in your life, that says, I'm just going to do the hokey pokey, or I'm just going to chakalaka. You know, that is going to get you out of whatever you're in. These are just like, that's a very simple little technique. I'll share some other things with you too. But, you know, the idea of resistance and limiting belief is correlated. Mary Mannon Morrissey, you're talking about her this morning with Teresa's class that's upcoming. Mary Mannon Morrissey says, I can't, we can't, you can't. Those words that we oftentimes hear, or might even say ourselves every once in a while, are just resistance and limiting belief. And she says that we hold on to our old beliefs and our limitations because we don't want to let go of them, you know, that we're resistant to letting go of them. So she said this is the way that we can consider the possibility that if we let go of these things and put ourselves into the flow of the river and allow ourselves to put some structure in place that guides that river, then we have the choice of how we manage our emotions to let go of resistance. And, you know, maybe we're holding on to the log in the river and it no longer serves us. We could possibly swim to the shore. But the analogy or the metaphor that she uses is you take that energy behind those emotions that come from resistance, and you're stuck in this resistance and you've got all this energy in your body. And she says, you know, decide if you're going to flow the river into a rampant flood, or if you're going to put some structure to it that takes it to the hydroelectric plant and produces some kind of positive energy. So I like Mary Mannon Morrissey. I think she has a lot of practical ideas, and I'm thrilled to hear that there's going to be this class here. I hope I'll be able to come to some of it. But these limiting beliefs that we have are all about that emotional level that is showing up in our lives that we want to shift. So you can do the hokey pokey, or you can do a number of other things. But how do we get to that resonance is really the secret. How do we get up to that higher level? How can we take ourselves and others higher? How do we get to the higher love? I've talked here before about the David Hawkins book, Power versus Force, and I highly, highly recommend that book. I don't have the book with me because I only have it on Kindle. I can't find my copy of it. I must have loaned it to somebody somewhere along the line. But he has this whole idea of mapping the consciousness and calibrating in micro millowatts, or whatever they are, people's kinesiological reactions to things. And his concept is if you get to 500 and above, you're at love and above. And that most of us are hanging around 200 or below. And so this is the frequency that we're resonating with, according to his theories, which I think are pretty valid. And, you know, to me, science is something that can be duplicated, and his research he's duplicated it over and over and over again, the results of it. But when you are at that lower level frequency, what do? How do you get it? It's boom chakalaka or whatever, you know. But I'm going to talk to you about some other little techniques. But it's about those beliefs that become habits, and how do we change the habits that show up in our behaviors, that show up as our life, that make our life be what it is. I call my life my charmed life, even when it doesn't seem so charmed. I want to believe. I want to choose to believe. It's all about choice. I want to make the decision that even though the weather today wasn't going to be fun to get out into, I was going to have to figure out some way to say, well, like Doug said, the rain is going to make my pasture green. Anything that we can come up to raise it to the next level. Esther Hicks in the Abraham work teaches that you take that emotion that you're at and you move it to the next doable increment, the next smallest doable increment that you can get it up to. That's another idea or technique. It's about being aware and noticing when you're where you don't want to be and making a choice and a decision to get someplace else. So in terms of habits, it's like acting as if is one of the things that we kind of teach in our early science of mind stuff, that you're not necessarily going to be able to change yourself overnight. You may want what someone else has. You may want what this philosophy has to offer, the results that you've seen in someone's life. Like you go to take the prosperity class. When I took it from Doug and Tina many years ago, it wasn't the Mary Man and Morrissey thing, but sure changed my idea about how it could work. But you got to take the baby steps sometimes to have something really get anchored in your consciousness and in your beingness. And so a lot of the techniques that are taught in the prosperity work are that type of baby step to get you to another subjective understanding, to erase your old idea and replace with the new one. And the replacement of the new one is what takes you to that resonance, that higher frequency, where you can then attract to you what is at that higher level of frequency, because we know how that law of attraction works too, that if we're down there in David Hawkins' 200 level, that's what we're attracting. The 200 level is just about to get beyond pride to courage, to be willing to change. And I think that's something you could learn from reading the book or looking. I'm sure there's a bunch of YouTube videos and that kind of stuff. I've not gone to look at that sort of thing. But we learn in the 12-step program, we teach in the 12-step program that if you act as if, that it's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than it is to think your way into a new way of acting. Because it's all about how we are anchoring this consciousness in our physiology as well as in our mental, psychological aspect of things. So I have a list of a few things that I wanted to share with you that I have found benefit from in my life that has to do with how do you get to the higher level of resonance, how do you leave this other stuff behind, how do you literally move yourself to a new place. Because I've talked here before about how we can do the spiritual bypass, and we can end up kind of just sitting on it, sitting with it, sitting on it, and smiling. But how do you really get to the place where you've changed, and as a consequence, everyone else has changed? Just how you've changed since I've changed. Kind of thing happens to you when that goes on. So one of the techniques is tapping, or EFT. You come to the workshop and you can learn more about how that does the physiological release of energy in your system through tapping on meridians. Another technique is visualization, imagination. That's one of the things that Mary Morrissey will be talking about, I'm sure, in the prosperity stuff that Teresa's going to teach, because that's a big part of her world, is the imaginal life that you're choosing for yourself, even though you're not quite there yet. You've got to stay this direction. If I want to go to the organs, I want to walk that way. I don't want to walk that way. And I want to picture myself getting there. I want to have that imaginal vision, and I want to decide today what's the best shot with what I've got to take me to the next level toward there. So I'm not going to take 6 steps and say, well, I didn't make it out there to the organs, I guess I'll quit. And the idea is I probably could, in some future quantum leap, jump over there. We'll have that teletransporting thing happening sometime, I'm sure. But I'm not going to be able to live long enough probably to see it happen. So I have to still take the steps on the ground. One of the things that I brought with me is this book called The Sedona Method. Are you guys familiar with the Sedona Method? It's a book and a concept and a technique and a bunch of workshops that has to do with releasing, primarily, letting go, releasing, and techniques to do it. And one of the things that I had intended to read you was from this book about resistance, if I can find it. Anyway, I've got I'm off by 100 pages. I remembered the page number wrong. Here I am book with Doug here. I had remembered it as 257. It's 157. He said, resistance feels like trying to move forward with the brakes on. So that was one of the things that I wanted to say. That's another thing that you can notice about how you're feeling when you're in resistance. Now I've lost my list. Here we go. So this is the Sedona Method. There are other things that are available here through Science of Mind, obviously. Science of Mind prayer request that you can put in the box to say, I want to release this. I am now releasing this. Please support me in releasing this. And then doing your own treatment work if you have been taught how to do the 5 steps of treatment for yourself. But turning it over to the practitioners and releasing it is one huge, huge opportunity to just drop the rock. Another thing that we have that comes out in classes now, but was originally put together by Marcia Sutton as a worksheet called Fear to Faith. The Fear to Faith process is one of identifying, again, it's about noticing, it's about, I'll have these up here if you guys want to look at them later. It's about noticing and being aware of what it is that you might choose to work on or choose to change. And this is a worksheet that helps you move through it. This one happens to be filled out because I did this a few years ago. And my word of God that I wanted to build my faith on was freedom. But the other part about it is that there's a little releasing prayer that you learn to do that has physical motions to it that is also very, very helpful in getting that stuff out of the biology. And this worksheet is now a part of what's taught in the foundational class. But so I'd recommend that. And if anybody wants these things too, I'd be happy to email them to you. Just come see me afterwards. This is the Radical Forgiveness worksheet. If you're familiar with the work of Colin Tipping and his books, Radical Forgiveness, Radical Self-Forgiveness, these are worksheets that he has that also helps you work through the ideas after noticing and helping you to notice what it is that you might consider doing differently or having shift in your mental process that would then translate into thoughts, words, actions, deeds, destiny, back to the Gandhi thing, to bring you to a higher level of resonance and letting go of the resistance. I think that one of the things I've benefited from in the past too is ritual burning. We talked a little bit about the rising phoenix in the talk that Reverend Bonnie gave. Byron Katie's The Work, a series of questions that I think also help us to be willing to anticipate the possibility that there's some other idea or opinion out there that might be available that could change our thought process. Ho'oponopono is another process of 3 or 4 steps that is a great releasing process. One of the books that helped me a lot in the early 90s was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Made some really big shifts in my life back then. And, the word paradigm sort of came into our vernacular as a consequence of his book and the idea of paradigm shift because the book became such a mass bestseller. I mentioned power versus force and about, where to get to on that. Another thing that's offered here at the center that I would highly recommend you consider taking part in is the Course in Miracles that meets every Saturday morning at 10:30, I think it is, or 11. I haven't been in a while. I guess it's 11. Thank you, Anthony. Course in Miracles is what I call a belief buster. You start to read the work in the Course in Miracles, and sometime after you throw the book at the wall, because you're so resistant to changing your idea of how it works, you start to get a little change in your idea of how it works. And so I would highly recommend the Course in Miracles. And if anyone were to say to me, well, what is the best of these things that you're recommending, Peggy? I would say try whatever works for you and keep working it. It's kind of like what diet is best or what exercise program is best or whatever. It's the one you'll do. That's the answer, the one you'll do. So dabble if you choose to, or if you find something that works or a process that works. These are just ideas about how to facilitate moving from resistance to resonance so that you're resonating at a higher level of frequency with what it is that you want for your life, what it is that these techniques have shown you that you want for your life if you don't understand or know what you want for your life. So please, please, please consider making the choice today. Make the decision today. Make today the day that you understand and know at a deeper level that you are greater than your conditions, that you can move to a higher level of thinking to get to a higher level of result, that your world can shift and change if you choose to make it so. And if your decision is not to, that's okay too. It'll happen when it happens. You do the work or the work does you. Whichever, however it shows up. But know that you can experience and express, I know you can experience and express a different you starting today, leaving this morning, out the door. You're guided, guarded, and protected by Spirit. A little experiment, a little tiny little move in a different direction of your thought process is not going to kill you. And it could give you a life that you've never known before. Namaste.